And we are live, y'all. We're live. All right. All right, what's up, everybody? How you doing? This is boy Cirillo, man. A familiar face in the place, man, on Black with No Chaser. I'm joined by my homegirl, Takesha Tobin, in the building from Entertainment Buddy. Bringing along a whole bunch of guests is Lanita Baker, attorney for the Breonna Taylor family. Philip Bailey from the Courier Journal, also Pulitzer Prize winner, I should say. We got Rep. Charles Booker in the house, running for U.S. senatorial candidate in Kentucky. We got Kaysa Herron, and we got her sister in the building. I'm sorry, make sure I remind me of your name again. Katora in the building. Thank you so much. Thank you. So look, we got a really special panel for y'all today. We're going to be diving into actually some of the facts and the fuzziness around what's been happening with the Breonna Taylor case down in Louisville, Kentucky. So if you're watching right now, make sure you're sharing it with everybody in your networks. A lot of information will be poured out to you from a policy perspective, an agenda. So we're hearing from Rep. Booker from that perspective. We're going to hear about as the facts as we know it right now in Louisville, Kentucky, with our Pulitzer Prize winner, Philip Bailey, in the building. Also, to kind of clear some of the air and hear some remarks on behalf of the family, we have attorney Lanita Baker also joining us. So thank you so much. And so I'm going to pass it over to our other esteemed moderator, Takesha, is in the building. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I want to first say thank you to everybody on the panel. Dr. Ricky Jones from University of Louisville, Lanita Baker again. We also have one of my favorite guests, Charles Booker, representative that's running for Senate. Just reiterating everything. And Philip Bailey, again, Pulitzer Prize winner. We cannot forget that. But the crazy thing about this whole entire thing is like the connection to the University of Louisville. That was just by chance. But with everything going on, I am a Louisville native, although I do not live there anymore. When I heard about what happened, I couldn't help but want to know more, because that could have been anybody. That could have been me if I was back home. It could have been my brother. It could have been anybody. So when I found out who was the attorney for the family, Attorney Lanita, I just had to reach out. Philip Bailey goes against the grain all the time, and also Dr. Ricky Jones too. Both of them go against the grain, so I wanted to get their perspective from it. Of course, again, I keep going for Charles Booker because the importance of having someone that looks like us in the Senate is very, 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 very important. So I'm so glad that you're here. And also Kaysa and her sister Katora, they're activists on the ground in Louisville. I was talking about Kaysa earlier on my live. She fights for us to have just decent food in West Louisville, which is crazy that you have to fight for those types of things. But she does it on a regular basis. I'm definitely proud of everybody on the panel. So I'm going to go into the first question, which is for Pulitzer Prize winning Philip Bailey. In your recent tweet, you put on blast the lackluster record of Louisville PD's Chief Steve Conrad. And but what about Breonna's case, as you understand the facts to be, has proven that Chief Conrad is unfit to serve the city as chief?
Well, first and foremost, I think, look, Chief Conrad has been police chief for an unusual long amount of time. Usually police chiefs are in power for about 2.5 years. This isn't his first rodeo. This isn't his first scandal. I mean, he has overseen a record number of homicides and shootings in Louisville. The Explorer case, which was a case where 2 police officers were indicted and convicted for sexually abusing scouts in the Explorer program here in the city. And just a litany of other things, and where the Metro Council had a no confidence vote in Chief Conrad. What makes this case, this Breonna Taylor case, I think so troubling for Chief Conrad, let's look at the warrant. If we look at the affidavit and the search warrant as we have at the Courier Journal, Breonna Taylor is only mentioned 3 times or so in that warrant, but she's never mentioned or accused of ever touching any drugs, being around any drugs in this so-called drug investigation, only via her apartment, only via her car being seen somewhere. And it really raises a question of the controls that the police department didn't have in place. One of the things that has happened as a result of this national attention on Louisville is Mayor Greg Fisher saying, well, from now on, we're going to have the police chief sign on no-knock warrants. But the question, I think Lanita will speak to this later, is how did this warrant even get signed for Breonna Taylor's apartment in the first place? Usually no-knock warrants are assigned for residences that have cameras because they're thinking drug suspects are going to destroy evidence. The only thing police are looking for in Breonna Taylor's apartment is apparently mail. If you look at the post-search warrant after her shooting, the only thing that they find in her apartment is mail material. Lanita may correct me on that. That's the only thing that I read in the post-search warrant. So there are questions about Chief Conrad and how his department is run even before this. As Dr. Jones will point out, you had the Reverend Kevin Cosby, senior pastor at St. Stephen's, get pulled over in a controversial stop. You had a Central High School homecoming king who was pulled over, 18-year-old kid, no crime whatsoever, just because he made a U-turn, a wide turn on the street. So long before Breonna Taylor's shooting, there has been pressure and questions about Chief Conrad's department and its application of law in particular areas. And I think my final point will be, look, Louisville, Kentucky is going through an opioid crisis right now, where just about every single white person is being touched by some sort of pain pill epidemic here. And if we're saying now that we're going to, based upon the evidence that we see in this search warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment, simply someone being suspected of carrying mail who might be suspected of selling drugs, they're susceptible to a no-knock warrant. There are Fourth Amendment and Second Amendment issues that are also being raised, particularly in a state like Kentucky, where everyone is upset about the COVID-19 restrictions. So I think this certainly puts a lot of pressure on Chief Conrad and local leadership. But I think the Breonna Taylor case is one where we have to question the police department's decision-making, its use of force, and its application of force, particularly when it comes to African Americans.
Appreciate that, Philip. And Lanita, I know that you are the family attorney for the Taylor family, and so as you've been wrapping your mind, your team is wrapping their mind around this case and how to really proceed forward. I think before we get into more of the facts as you know it to be, what are some things that the family, I know you can't mention a lot out of attorney-client privilege, but what are some things on behalf of the family that they've been, some sentiments, if you will, to kind of give a little humanization to this? 'Cause a lot of times we see these people as hashtags. We don't really get to know who they are, what they've been through, who they've been to the community, the things they've done on the front lines. We know that she was a decorated EMT, award-winning EMT, and a frontline worker for Louisville for a long time. And so right now, just kind of give a little gloss, I'll give little thoughts about what the family is actually going through before we really get into where we're at right now with the facts in the case.
Yeah, Breonna's family's hurting. This is a family that lost an important part of their family. She's a 26-year-old daughter, sister, niece. She enjoyed being around her family. She was a ER tech in 2 hospitals. So not 1 hospital, but 2 hospitals in Louisville. And mind you, this did happen at the very beginning of this COVID-19 outbreak. So she was a frontline worker. Her little sister lived with her at the time that this happened. It's thankful that she was not home that night because their mom could have very well lost both daughters. And that would have been even more of a travesty. But Breonna's family, what they would like to see, they want true reform. They don't want to hear about it. And while the policy changes that were announced yesterday are a nice start, we're going to hold Mayor Fisher to his promises of more changes to come. Policy change, though, isn't enough, because just as you can change a policy based off of this, you can go back and change a policy and we never know that it's been changed. So we really do need legislative policy changes. And that's one thing that we will be pushing for on behalf of the Taylor family. We will be pushing for legislative changes. It becomes to no-knock warrant and the use of them. And we know from how dangerous they are that they are not, they should not be used for narcotics investigations. Only in extreme circumstances should no-knock warrants be used. And when I say extreme, I mean you're looking for a suspected murderer, serial killer, terrorist, kidnapper, something along those lines, but not for narcotics. It just doesn't, the means don't outweigh the means don't outweigh the risk. It's too many risks associated with no-knock warrants. We also want, and they had a policy, so it's important to know LMPD has a policy to record all search warrants. That policy is already in effect. I know from other cases that this policy is not adhered to. Not only is it not adhered to, it seems to be the exception to record a search warrant. But there's no reason that search warrants should not be, officers should not have body cams and when executing 100% of search warrants in this city. There's no reason they shouldn't have it. They can't say because of the undercover work. When you execute that search warrant, you're not working undercover anymore. So those are definitely changes that they want to see, and they want them legislative changes, not just policy changes.
Policy changes, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And a couple more things, because I want to make sure I get their wishes. They want the chief gone. And Mr. Bailey touched on some of those things, so we can go into it when we get to the big discussion, but the change at the top needs to happen. And lastly, while we don't represent Mr. Walker, we do advocate for Tom Wine to drop all charges against Mr. Walker. So I know you had a question, so I turn it back over to you now.
No. And I just want to clear that really quickly. I think a lot of times when people hear legislative action or policy, those two terms kind of get conflated. I think that what Ms. Baker was saying here is that from a legislative side, from an actual, like, I guess, more typical way in which legislators like Charles Booker within Kentucky would legislate on, when she's talking about the internal policy of the police department, that can be changed and flip-flopped on a minute's notice. We've already seen, and I just want to make the point that within the last 4 days, they've already amended that policy already to kind of mitigate. And to me, it seems that when you do that, you already take some type of blame or assume some blame for an erroneous or type of like too far reaching policy you have in place already that opens the door for instances like tragic instances like this that leave our brothers and sisters dead in the street, or in this case, dead in their apartment at 1 a.m. From a no-knock raid. So just want to make that point of clarification there. So as people understand about policy, legislative action, and how we move through this conversation, the policy we're speaking of right now is the flipping of the policy by police chief as it stands. But we'll get that a bit more later. I know, Booker, you're over there shaking your head like, okay, I hear you, brother. So we're going to get that into a brief second, but I really want to turn it back over to Lanita. Thank you so much for actually giving us an overview about the family's wishes. But I want to get to you, though, and kind of adding to the fact that what Philip Bailey was saying earlier is, what are some things the public may not know? And we're not talking about things that are privy to only you and your client, but what are some things the public may not know about this case and that can help clear up some of the misinformation that's been circling to Breonna Taylor's death?
I think the media is getting information out there. So I guess if there's specific questions that I have, I'd rather answer them in that way. But as we know, that there was a search warrant for Breonna's apartment. Shady police work in that in getting that search warrant. Shady lies we've learned since. Stale information. This information happened 2 months ago in January. So much so that when they executed the warrant, they were looking for a car that Breonna no longer owned. So that's how old the information was. Search warrants typically, when they're presented to a judge for signing, it's with information that they've observed within 24 to 48, maybe 72 hours, but it's more recent than 2 months old. Breonna Taylor has no drug history whatsoever, no criminal history whatsoever. So to try to say that they believe, it's speculation, they believe what was in the package. They could have stopped, if they really thought it was drugs, they could have stopped Mr. Glover when he left our house to say, and saw what was in that box.
And this is an important point, I think, that the public needs to know about now. This information has come forth. Because Lanita is correct in this instance, that the police were saying, we saw DeMarcus Glover, the suspected drug dealer, leaving Breonna Taylor's apartment with a suspicious package. And they say in their warrant that they had contacted the U.S. Postal Service inspector. Well, that U.S. Postal inspector in Louisville has spoken up, and he has said he was never contacted by LMPD. He was contacted by a separate agency. And furthermore, that there is no way for them to even tell if someone is obtaining or receiving a suspicious package. Now, that I think was one of the more startling revelations thus far from a reporting side, because generally speaking, and this is an issue, let me get into a little bit of media criticism here. Usually we report what the police say. And more we should start reporting what the police allege. It's an allegation still by the police at that point. It is not a fact. Because if you read the warrant, often it says the affiant based upon experience and training. That basically means the narcotics officer's opinion. Based upon my prior experience and opinion, I think DeMarcus Glover is leaving her apartment with a suspicious package. Well, now the inspector is from the U.S. Postal Service is saying they never got that information from us, and that we were contacted by a separate law enforcement agency, and we're not sure how they got that information. So that's another piece for Chief Conrad, who is going to be testifying tomorrow before Metro Council, to answer what is this information that you all obtained? Where did you actually get it from? And why is it that the U.S. Postal Service, which is a federal agency, why is it undercutting the very investigation that you all had into Mr. Glover that wrapped up Breonna Taylor, pretty much because she was again, someone went over her home and picked up a piece of mail, and her car was seen somewhere. Never was she seen anywhere touching any drugs or even alleged to have touched any drugs. I've talked to a few former narcotics officers here in Louisville, veteran narcotics officers, and they say if someone like Breonna Taylor is involved in the investigation, generally you approach that person at work, or you approach them during working day hours and ask them what's going on. You don't kick their door in. So again, the question for Chief Conrad, the question for Mayor Greg Fisher, the question for Judge Mary Shaw, the question for the head of narcotics, Kim Burbank, the question for all those in power is, why was Breonna Taylor's apartment targeted for a no-knock warrant?
With old information. I think it's also important to know that they indicated that they were trying to execute these warrants simultaneous. We know about 2 warrants. There's actually a 3rd warrant that was out there that I don't know that people know about. And that 3rd warrant, they abandoned their attempts to serve that warrant. They decided not to execute that search warrant. So they didn't have to, obviously, if you were executing them all simultaneous, and the reason they gave is so that no one could, notify someone else to, hey, they're coming, but you didn't execute it on that 3rd one. And just the history of Officer Brett Hankinson. He has a horrible history, a number of PIU investigations. He should not be working in this capacity as a police officer, and definitely not on the merit board of the police review merit board as an LMPD representative.
And we see this time and time again, y'all. Time and time again, we see police either on administrative leave, right, or they get a slap on the wrist. It's not until these type of things happen where we start digging, we get Pulitzer Prize winner Philip Bailey on your ass, and all of a sudden, right, facts start to get uncovered in a way in which that puts the heat and pressure on these on law enforcement agencies like Louisville Metro Police Department. So the time is now to actually stop with the actual lip service, right? I think Black communities for far too long want answers. We want political, we want legislative action that's going to alleviate, suspend, or all the way wipe out instances that happen far too often. And we're not even getting to the fact of all the different hashtags that showed up almost within the same week, right? Within 10 days of each other. So we're going to get to that as well. But we want to make sure we stay on top of Breonna Taylor's case for a second. Lenita, really quickly, while we got you here, and we're on the topic of what kind of happened that night. From what I understand, the police or the mother, right, of Breonna Taylor was actually out looking for her. Why was she looking for her in the night in question, and where did she end up going in search for her daughter? If you could clear it up a bit.
Tamika got a call from Kenny as this was taking place. And I don't want to get into too much of it, but like any mother would, she went to the apartment to see what was going on. Like, you know, he said, someone's trying to get in here. Kenny also called the police because he didn't know who was coming into his home. Like any person, Second Amendment right, black or white, you have a right to defend your home if you think someone's burglarizing. And that is, Kenny was under the impression that his home was being burglarized. So he called Tamika, Breonna's mom. He called 911. There's a 4-minute 911 call we want so bad, and we haven't been able to get that yet. But when she got there, she was told by someone that they believed her daughter was taken to the hospital in EMS. She went to the hospital, learned that her daughter wasn't at the hospital, came back to the scene, and basically it was a while before she learned that Breonna was still in the home, and basically her daughter was deceased.
And that's actually a hard spot for any mother to be in, looking around for your daughter at night, getting calls, not knowing exactly what that was, what's happened to your daughter, only to find out that she was killed by a no-knock raid, in the wee hours of the night. And so, I don't want to go all doom and gloom right here. I kind of want to, Takesha, I know you want to jump in.
Well, I guess we can, because we wanted to talk about the facts that could possibly not be known by the public. So I appreciate you clearing those up, and especially talking about what happened with the mom. And we also wanted to go, because we're talking about policies, we wanted to go to Representative Booker. And this question is for you, Representative Booker. If elected in November, you'll be the youngest person ever elected to the U.S. Senate and the 11th Black person elected or appointed to the U.S. Senate in its history, which is beyond me. What is your take on the recent murder of Breonna Taylor by law enforcement? And what federal policy agenda will you take to Capitol Hill that will eliminate or mitigate these tragic occurrences from happening to innocent Black Kentuckians, that extends beyond the call for more body cameras or more funding for law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank y'all for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I was having a tough time taking those facts in. And
Right.
I thought about your words in the beginning when you were saying that we need people in positions of decision-making that not merely look like us, but see us and understand these challenges at a structural level, and are personally acutely aware of the work that we need to do to change these things, and not just talk about it. I feel that responsibility, and I want to honor you in that. I want to honor all of y'all in that, regardless of your political leanings or what have you. This ain't about politics. These structural challenges cut across, and we all know that. And in the case with Breonna, I've really been hurting. I'd heard about the incident when it happened. And then the pandemic hits, and I'm in the legislature, and I'm also running for United States Senate, and I'm hoping that our institutions will do their jobs. Well, we also know, which is why we're here today, that in many cases, especially if the person that is being victimized looks like we do, those institutions typically don't work the way we'd like them to. So I'm not surprised that we're here, but I'm just devastated that we are, especially hearing all of these new aspects that are just really, it's really damning. And I'm proud of Ms. Palmer, the family, for speaking up and using this moment of pain to say we want things to change so that nobody else has to go through this. And we need leaders to get that. And I paused on sharing some personal information. I ultimately did tweet about it, but Breonna's connected to my family, and actually it's one of the incidents that I thought Philip would mention My cousin TJ was a part of what was called the Misidentified Four. Again, this speaks to the ills and the structural racism, the structural inequities within our criminal justice system that sees Black men and women and sees deadly weapons and sees an opportunity to criminalize before an opportunity to protect them. And my cousin was arrested in prison for an incident that he was nowhere near, and was ultimately released after faulty witnesses were proven, after GPS data showed that he wasn't at the location of it. Just was about the riot at the waterfront, and he ended up getting a big settlement from the city. So again, this is another string of incidents that need to be accounted for, and he was ultimately murdered in the car that he bought with his settlement. And he was really good friends with Breonna. And it hurts me to think that these two really incredible, brilliant people have been robbed from us. But it hurts even more to know that this is not, like, none of us are surprised. This happens so often. The frequency in which these types of things happen really gives me a sense of urgency in what I want to do, what I've been fighting for in the state legislature, but certainly as the next United States Senator. And there was a moment, I've spoken a lot about this, where, and Lanita is so right, there are dynamics where policies are involved, but there's a moment where we have to show the courage to codify them into law so that they withstand changes in administrations and that we make it clear what our priorities are. And we need that right now. I mean, you can go down the list of what's happened in this incident, and more facts are coming out, and you can see opportunities for structural, meaningful change and legislative change. And in this last year that I have in office, I'm going to be working on some things with that already for no-knock warrants. That whole process needs to be reviewed. And the fact that there are policies that restrict it clearly aren't being adhered to, and the evidence is showing that we need some work to be done. And so I'm going to be working on legislation to do that. And also, we've been pushed for citizen review in a meaningful way with subpoena power. We need that at this level, and we need that support at the federal level. There was a policy idea that I heard introduced actually during the presidential discourse around police system review boards. I think that is a good idea. We need to be tracking the data and understanding how these disproportionate effects, these instances are happening across the country, so that we can begin to deal with them at a systemic level and understand the structural challenges involved in them. And you know what? I think about Mitch McConnell more than I'd like to.
Oh, trust me, we all thinking about it. Trust me, you ain't the only one.
I appreciate y'all sharing that plight with me, man, because as we have these conversations, and what we're talking about is structural racism. We're talking about institutional racism. We're talking about gross inequity and how our systems work and function for all people with respect to what they look like, where they live, how much money they have. And you're never going to see Mitch McConnell remotely look at anything regarding racial challenges because he's the same person that said electing Barack Obama was reparations. And now he's telling that same Black man that he needs to keep his mouth shut. And it just pains me that so many of us are so invisible in the place where decisions are made. And my point with Mitch McConnell is that he should be putting pressure on William Barr right now to make sure the DOJ is putting urgent effort into assessing racial biases within law enforcement, making sure that resources are being put in place to actually incentivize in earnest what community policing should be. We got to reimagine policing. There's no excuse for these types of things to be happening. You need to be safe in your home. And as everyone that is all over the Commonwealth talking about they want their rights and their freedoms protected, someone kicked the door in, not someone, law enforcement kicked the door in of a citizen that was in their bed, that was doing everything that we're asking Kentuckians to do. And then her partner was standing his ground, as we also say you should be able to do. But if your skin is different hue, you don't have ground to stand on.
There you go. Come on,
Yeah.
preach.
And so, I think it's just critical that you all are doing the work to call this out. And I'm not surprised from the standpoint of Breonna, because she was incredible, that she is going to help push this conversation forward and push for real change. That's what she would have done if she was still here anyway. So we're going to honor her in that. And I'll keep this fight going for y'all, with y'all, because I know you're going to hold me accountable. But I appreciate y'all letting me be a part of this.
No,
Man, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, man. Thank you for that thoughtful answer. I think that Kentucky it's obviously a staunch Republican state. It's an uphill battle for our brothers. We don't want to excuse that fact from what he has in front of him as we inch towards November 3rd. But make no mistake about it, man. Charles Booker is a worthy and well qualified brother out there in Kentucky. So y'all make sure y'all donate to his campaign right now. Every nominal donation, where it's $1, $5, $10, we need more representation in Congress, especially on the Senate level. So y'all make sure y'all drop a donation right now. Booker, really quickly, man, for folks out there, because I want to derail the conversation, but how can folks donate to your campaign, brother?
I appreciate you giving me this chance. Listen, this moment is not about me as a candidate, but I also know that we need people as candidates that actually see us and give a damn about us. I will say that you can go to bookerforkentucky.com to support our movement. But right now, if you got resources to provide, I want you to connect with the family. And, I'm fighting this fight. We building this movement with all Kentuckians. We're going to win this thing. But right now, this family is in pain, and we need justice in our community. And I'm just glad that everybody is raising awareness right now for that. So I appreciate that.
Appreciate that. We will kind of switch gears a little bit. I know folks kind of waiting around, try to jump in, man. We playing a little hopscotch double dutch right now. But Couture, Casa, Dr. Jones, man, thank y'all so much for waiting patiently. Right now, I really want to kind of turn the conversation over to Dr. Ricky Jones. Recently, you published an op-ed titled, "This is How Black Moderates Helped Kill Ahmaud Arbery." The article, by the way, was well written, and a lot was said, including, "This is simply the latest episode in Black people's never-ending die, cry, repeat cycle after another life is snuffed out by racially motivated violence." In the very next sentence, though, you follow up by saying, "Unfortunately, Black people themselves are helping with that process." So I got to ask you, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, first of all, let me say this. It's a great night for me sitting here, because everybody in this, as I go across from Ms. Baker to Mr. Bailey to Ms. Tobin to Ms. Herron, and Charles Booker's one of my fraternity brothers, but all of them are old students of mine. So it's not just the University of Louisville connection. I'm not sure if all of them also share a professor. So I'm very proud of all of them.
No pop quizzes tonight.
Say what?
No pop quizzes.
Yeah, when Tobin brought up those 10 Black senators, I was about to ask, okay, Tobin, name those senators. Start off with Blanche.
I can give you a few. I can give you a couple. I give you a couple.
But what I was really saying, brother, is that, and Brother Booker started to touch on this. What we're really talking about in this whole thing is myriad manifestations of white supremacy. That's what this really is about. When people talk about white supremacy, they think it's just about, folks, armed guys in Charlottesville marching, or people in Klan hoods. But that's not really what white supremacy is just about. White supremacy is about the structures of systems where white people are the ones who think they're the only ones who get to know, to think, and decide. And so in every space, whether it's in the newspaper room with Philip, or it's at a university with me, or at a radio station, or a corporation, or a law firm, usually we may be there, we're there in very, very small numbers. And the people who are running those systems do not look like us. So when you talk about politics, this is what Brother Booker was speaking to. Any decisions that are being made where we are concerned, we do not have people who look like us who are making those decisions. Here's a deeper, more insidious way that white supremacy manifests itself, and we have a particular percentage of Black people participating. I'm not talking about Black on Black crime. Black on Black crime is a lie. Most crime in this country is intraracial because the country is still incredibly highly segregated. So when something happens with Black people, if somebody brings up Black on Black crime, you're talking to a racist. That's a canard, that's a lie, that's a diversion. But what white supremacy has done in post-integration America, they have very, very carefully chosen certain types of Black people to occupy spaces that look like they have some type of decision-making power. But usually these people don't have power. They at best have influence, and they're constantly trying to endear themselves to their white masters. So when I talked about the Black people who are helping with the killings of people like Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or Tamir Rice or Trayvon Martin or any of our other men, women, and children in this country, I'm talking about the Black moderates, the moderates who put themselves in these places because some people call them Uncle Toms, other people call them sellouts, whatever, right? And we're not talking about the Clarence Thomases of the world. Again, in the column I say, you know, the Candace Owens, the Clarence Thomases of the world, we see them coming a mile away. I'm talking about the Black people who will smile in your face and say, well, we gotta do things the right way. And they're trying to slot themselves into a system, play it safe, keep what they have, and really not have the interests of the masses at heart. And what happens at the end of the day really is you have white supremacist systems that have never ever changed unless they've been challenged by Black radicals. And you can walk it up from Absalom Jones to Richard Allen to Frederick Douglass to Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, up to today. It's been the Black radicals, King X. Today is Malcolm X's birthday, so we would be remiss in not mentioning him. So it's been the Black radicals who have pushed things in a direction that have made the system for a moment here and there recognize Black humanity, but it's been the Black moderates who benefited from it, who've taken these positions where they are highly paid and also highly afraid and don't give a damn about the masses of Black people. And so I think if for my old students and for anybody else, we have to be guided by an overarching ideology. And for me, and hopefully for them, and I think it does guide them, is a constant ideology of challenging white privilege and white supremacy in America, so that we can come to a point where if something happens to us, we have people who not only look like us, but also think like us and care about us, making decisions concerning us. And I would imagine if the McMichaels down in Georgia knew that there was a good possibility that there would be some Black people who were making decisions about their fate, they probably wouldn't have went and hunted Ahmaud Arbery down. If we have white police who are agents of the state and they understand they got to deal with Black decision makers in politics, in the criminal justice system, on the bench, all of these things, they probably would make some different decisions where Black people are concerned. But the Black moderates are the ones whose responses are so weak and spineless that white power structures are basically like, we will disrespect you, we will professionally ruin you, we will psychologically terrorize you, we may even kill you, and once it happens, what the hell are you gonna do? What's gonna be your response? So we gotta figure out a way to respond differently.
I appreciate that, Brother Jones, man. Dr. Jones, for real, man. That was a very insightful answer. I think that, like, you know, what's funny, even as I read it, me and Takesha, I was like, well, what are we gonna say about that last line? Because I mean, that could be a little tongue in cheek for some Black folks out there talking about Black folks are part of the problem. But I'm glad you clarified that in the way in which,
first of all, for Black folk who might have some problem with it, first of all, read the whole damn article.
There we go.
And
there we go.
Black folk who got a problem with it, after they read the article, they're probably the problem. And I really don't give a damn if they do have a problem.
And you heard it here first on Black with No Chaser, Dr. Jones from Louisville, from the University of Louisville, man. I appreciate you, brother. But with that energy right there, though, I really want to, Kesa, and I know Couture, you over there shaking your head. Couture is actually a policy strategist and expert over there for the ACLU. But I know as on the activist side, Casa, you've been doing a lot of work on the ground in Louisville, and so have you, Couture. You all are sisters. I want y'all to kind of weigh in for a second, and feel free to kind of chime in a way that makes sense. But from I guess, Casa, let's start with you first. From an activism level, what are some things that we could be doing right now on the ground or collectively from a digital organizing capacity that can get to results faster? So where we got Lanita Baker on the line right now looking for particular facts and evidence that she hasn't received yet. What kind of pressures as the public, as a Black community, that we can start levying right now in this very moment and moving forward from this moment?
I'm gonna pick up where Dr. Jones left off. 1965, Alberta Jones was killed. She was found in her car in the river. She was Ali's first attorney. She was the first Black prosecutor in the city of Louisville. She was prosecuting white men who were abusing their wives. So she was probably prosecuting police officers. She was killed. And a couple of years ago, a white lady from Bellarmine University resurrected her story, and she's trying to find justice for her. Why have Black people in Louisville not fought for her? Let's start there. Let's start there. We have a mayor that surrounds himself with plenty of Black folks. We have a Commonwealth attorney who does the same thing. They show up at all kinds of events. We give them seats at the front of the room. We give them the mic on a regular basis. And what we see is a mayor who has the inability to make tough decisions. We have a police chief who has no control of the police department. And we have Tom Wine, who's prosecuting a brother who was defending our sister. We have some of their family members who have been quiet. This is on us. This is on us. We elected Mayor Fisher. He won because Black folks got him through the primary, the same way in which we're going to get Booker through the primary. He has not responded to the needs of Black folks, and we have not forced him to. We've been okay with these little $20,000 grants, a seat at the table that's not going to have any say-so in anything. We've allowed him to take our language and do nothing about it. We have our own Amazon here, Churchill Downs. They hire people, contract on contract. They don't pay local taxes. And they made 183% increase when they opened up the tracks. And nobody was there to watch the horses. They don't pay property taxes. There's a lot of work to be done here in Louisville. And it starts with us voting. We have a brother here who's sticking out his neck to run and to beat the illest politician that we've had in this country. And we have, I don't know, how many local endorsements have you gotten from Kentucky? I know members of Kentuckians for the Commonwealth endorsed him in February. We have 12,000 members, 14 chapters across the state. Most of them are white folks, white poor folks. And we decided that we were gonna put our chance on this brother to change the face of our work. This is the work. Folks got to get out and got to vote. They need to vote. They need to call their council people and tell their council people, what are you talking to the mayor about in this case? When are you gonna hire Conrad? He ought to send his ass packing as soon as he finishes testifying in his budget hearings next week.
It just so you know, to put a number on it though, right? There's 16 right now Democratic supporters in Kentucky supporting Brother Booker right now, just so y'all know. So it's not like he's some fly by night brother. People know the work that he's been doing in Kentucky State Legislature.
And let's say those legislators didn't do that accidentally. There's a sister named Representative Attica Scott who kicked their ass and said, we're gonna put our necks behind Booker. There are Black women leading this shit all the time and we don't get heard from and spoken to. My sister is gonna say more about the legislative pieces that need to happen locally and statewide to change some of this stuff.
Awesome. Appreciate the
Well, I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you all for having this and lifting up the story of Breonna Taylor. And I just thank all the panelists. You all have said good points. I'm shaking my head, snapping my fingers the whole time. And I think one of the things that was brought up was a big piece of talking about the difference between policy and legislation. I think that the mayor, I don't know if he was forced to make that decision of saying we're going to change this policy. And I just want people not to be hoodwinked and think that that is a good thing that he said that. He did say that, but that's just the first step. And we need to know that only will apply to Louisville Metro Police Department. So that does not apply to St. Matthews. That will not apply to J-Town. And we know that those police departments have continued to terrorize Black and brown folks. And so we are going to be pushing for no-knock warrants. And we want that to be a city ordinance. That's going to be the first step. And then after that, we are going to push for that to be a statewide legislation. And I also need folks to know that when we bring stuff to the state, it's a fight. The majority of our legislators, the folks in our legislators that have power are former police, former FBI. And so when we talk about starting to push this, we need people on the grounds. We need people coming to Frankfurt. We need people involved in that. Another piece of legislation that we need to start looking at it is how we are allocating funds. And so we need to be calling for a divestment in our local police department and investment into people and to the community. I think that I saw earlier this week, and I don't know the numbers, but I believe that is our local health department only gets 10% of the budget that Louisville, the police department gets, that public safety gets. And so when you talk about building communities, healing communities, that is ridiculous. And so we need to demand that we get those funds. And then another thing Senator Neal has been pushing for the last couple of years is racial impact statements on all policies. And so basically what that means is that when any type of policy or legislation, legislation, any type of legislation that is happening at the state level, that there needs to be a racial impact study lens put on that, so we can see what type of impact that will have on Black and brown communities. We need to do that for that. And then we also need to have a health impact statement that will do the same. And so right now, I think that those are the top pieces of legislation and policies that we need to be doing. And I will say this, it's very interesting because I think it was last year that I said that Louisville was one incident away from an incident like they had in Ferguson. And I honestly, truly believe that if we weren't in the situations of COVID, I think that you would see drones of people acting in a way of frustration. I know me personally, as a Black queer woman, working, changing policy and hearing what some of our decision makers, what they say, what they do, and seeing the outcomes. People are upset and we're angry, and it's time for us to band together. Dr. Jones, exactly what you said. There's the moderate Black folks. We need y'all to get off y'all's butts and stand with us. Like, this is no more, no more.
Show your mayor that picture y'all took at the gala and tell him there's some reparations to be served.
And I think one thing I want to say this, and I'll end, is that that the same mayor that was elected, he's the same mayor that supported the gang bill that passed here in Kentucky a couple of years ago. And so it was those pieces of legislation like that we need to be aware of and we need to stay on top of. And I just tell people who are watching, the regular folks who have influence, please use your influence to make positive change. And we got work to do. There's enough work for everybody. And we don't want in 20 years our young people to be having these same conversations.
What did y'all do? What did y'all do?
Well, damn. I mean, shit, Couture appreciate that. You know what I mean? Like, they laid out there for us quite nicely on the policy rundown. I think that those are honestly like some very, very intuitive and thoughtful policy proposals that to me, though, if you have humanity at the forefront, these aren't hard policies to pass. I think that when you are controlled by private dollars, big time lobbying firms and things of that nature, then it becomes your political capital that you're willing to spend becomes a little bit harder, right? And you're trying to figure out, okay, I only got really $10 to spend on political capital. So yeah, Black folks, I hear y'all, but maybe not this time around, right? We need folks in Congress, in state legislatures, in municipalities and city councils that actually put people first, right? When we put people first, we actually contemplate policies that are born out of empathy and not tolerance. I think that's an important point to make when we talk about as we kind of figure out who's going to be the next wave of leaders in this country. That's why I'm very glad that we have Charles Booker here, rep from Kentucky right now, running for U.S. Senate down there in Kentucky, man.
I would add to that the mayor is a lame duck. He can't get elected mayor anymore. So he has, unless he's gonna run for Congress or he's gonna run for governor, he has nothing else to lose to make these decisions. So like folks,
there's a lot of questions asking about the mayor, and it is like, mayor, he'll finish his terms out. We need to be focused on long and longer term changes. And I think one thing that people have talked about is, and Cassie talked about it is, you know, I get asked all the time, oh, you know, you guys need to go after them criminally. I can't prosecute someone criminally. I just can't. I don't have the power to. The police will bring the charges and it's going to be, how is it presented to the grand jury? The office that presents the case to the grand jury typically is the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Now that's at the AG's office. In this case, the case with the Office of Investigation will be turned over to the Attorney General's office. Those are those elections that count. The elections that count are the judicial elections. Why did a judge sign off on this warrant with 2-month-old information that was purely speculative? There was nothing in that warrant that justified it to be a no-knock warrant. So we got to know, we got to quit when the next set of judicial elections are 2022. All 43 seats in Jefferson County will be open. And I'm assuming that the state don't take any of our judges, but we have 43 elected judges in Jefferson County. In 2022, all 43 will be up for re-election. So they will be open seats. Everyone will have to fight to retain. Don't flip over that ballot and say, I don't know who these people are. Make it a point to know who they are. We have to.
Right. Well, Lenita, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this is an important part to make too. Very little attention has been given to Judge Olu Stevens, Jefferson Circuit Judge Olu Stevens, who was really in combat with Prosecutor Tom Wine a few years ago over African Americans being selected on juries and how they were being selected on juries. He was the one who first drew attention to this case by insisting, rather than being incarcerated in Metro Corrections, that Kenneth Walker be on home incarceration. And that was when the FOP and others were outraged about this case, not because of Breonna Taylor, but because Kenneth Walker was being put on home incarceration. So even when we talk about what African Americans in Kentucky want to advance their political agenda, there's also things that they have to maintain and keep in mind, which is that those individuals will also be on the ballot. There's a little bit of news, Lenita, when she speaks about the 911 tapes, two things. One, the Courier-Journal, we are suing the city of Louisville for those 911 tapes and for a slew of other records that we have submitted to the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, who is, by the way, the first African-American Attorney General in Kentucky's history. So how, I know, here we go.
Black folks voted for it.
Black folks voted for it.
A second piece of information is Council President David James and I think Councilwoman Jessica Green are planning to file a resolution demanding those 911 tapes be released. And I think it's important here to remember, we're both talking about the Breonna Taylor case in the short term, but as Casa and Dr. Jones are talking about, there is a and Representative Booker is, there's a longer term political fight that's been going on. We've been fighting for and talking about a civilian review board in Louisville for 20 something years.
20 some years.
Right, when the original Board of Aldermen passed a civilian review board with subpoena power and the new merged government, because remember the argument for merger was, the argument against merger from a lot of African Americans was Louisville used to be a chocolate city. Louisville used to be a city that was 35% African American, where a lot of power was consolidated within African American hands. We merged with the rest of Jefferson County. We dilute that political power. Now, some of that has come back slightly. Louisville's about a 22% African American city, but nowhere near where it was in the late 90s. So some of these fights are about not only African Americans in Louisville and the fight for Breonna Taylor and bringing attention to that case and holding Mayor Fisher, Steve Conrad, et cetera, Judge Mary Shaw and others accountable, but it's also this question of how does that political power expand as well. And in a state like Louisville, and Dr. Jones and I have had a conversation about this on his radio program, Kentucky is a very, very conservative state, largely because its diversity is in Louisville, right? Like the reason why Georgia looks like it's a state that's about to flip blue potentially is because there's diversity being driven by Atlanta, et cetera. So part of the problem in this conversation is that people of talent and merit leave Louisville trying to escape sort of the political sort of overbearing, the sort of lily white overbearing of both the city of Louisville and the state. And it leaves, I think, a lot more political gaps for African Americans in Louisville. So you have occasionally someone like a Judge Olu Stevens who will say, no, we're going to put this guy on home incarceration rather than Metro Corrections. And the focus initially is not about why did he do that? The focus is the FOP being upset with him, trying to get him out of that race. Because the coveted endorsement for people who are running for judge, for prosecutor, isn't Black Lives Matter. isn't Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. It's the police union.
Mhm.
So that's a part of the political establishment as well, is that breaking that establishment is more than just protesting, is more than just voting. I mean, it is literally a fight of humanity for African Americans in places like Kentucky and Missouri and other smaller states as well.
That's right.
Phil, let me make 3 quick points
Go ahead.
to what you just said. One, a historical point, when there were a lot of Black people in Louisville who were for merger of city and
Yes.
county.
Yes.
Either they were for it or they didn't engage the issue. And our argument against it then was, this is just a case of political power. When you have a city that is creeping up over 35% Black, on the horizon, you're going to be able to elect a Black mayor, right? I mean, I'm from Atlanta. We've had a Black mayor in Atlanta since 1973, and Black people didn't understand that. And so many of them, some in power or influence in the Black community, left their fate in the hands of others. And you see what's happened, 2 decades later. That's one. 2, you brought up Daniel Cameron, and that speaks to the point that I was speaking to earlier. I taught Daniel Cameron too. I love Daniel, but somebody got to be right and somebody got to be wrong when you talk about Black people. My dear brother Daniel Cameron is one of the most conservative young brothers that I've ever met in my entire life, and he sees Mitch McConnell as a father figure. Yet Black people, and so anybody listening to this, and Phil, you made the point, he's the first state elected Black official in the history of this state. He's the first Black attorney general, but he don't give a damn about Black people in that way. But Black people themselves will still celebrate him because they're enamored by Black faces in high places. And when the rubber hits the road, when the whip comes down, he ain't there for him. Okay? And so we need to stop celebrating people like that, because that's harmful to the Black community itself. And third, I want to be really, really clear and very, very succinct. Olu Stevens, who is my classmate from Morehouse College, tried to soften the blow on Brother Kenneth Walker, a man who lost the woman that he loves, who was trying to defend her against agents of the state who came in and rapaciously took her life without announcing themselves. He didn't know that he was shooting at police, right? He was simply trying to defend the woman he loved. They kill her. He hits one person in the leg. They charge him with attempted murder. Kenneth Walker should be let go and left alone. He should not be charged with anything like yesterday. They need to let that brother go. And for Tom Wine or any other prosecutor in this state, this country, or this world to pursue punishing that brother in this case is a sin and a shame. So we've lost Breonna. Let's try to save Kenneth Walker right now, as I'm sure he's traumatized, and these people continue to torment him after they murdered the woman that he loved. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make with that, so people are not confused as you continue to celebrate Black Uncle Toms because you want to be close to somebody that you think has a little bit of popularity and a little bit of power, and they will let you, your loved ones, your children die. We need to be clear about that.
We
If I can real quick,
I'm
just
about to say, yeah, jump right back in. Yeah, for sure.
So one thing, we've been asked how we feel about Tom Wine recusing himself and Daniel Cameron getting the case. Daniel Cameron is not my choice of AG1 for the same reasons that Dr. Jones have expressed. But one thing we're fairly certain of, 95, 98, 99% certain of, is that Tom Wine, it would have been very difficult to probably get an indictment against these officers. So we're not really in any worse of a spot with it going to Daniel Cameron, I don't think. That's just, and I'll say that's my thought. See how it works when it goes somewhere else, because Tom Wine doesn't have a history of indicting police officers for their wrongdoing. So I don't think that necessarily would have changed if he kept this case.
But Lanita, I think, is it safe to say, and this might piggyback to what Castle was saying earlier, is that, look, Tom Wine, who is a Democrat, is often seen at these Martin Luther King celebrations, right? Like, I mean, I can remember him being in the motorcade, and when he was fighting with Judge Olu Stevens, there was an effort to push him out of the motorcade. And this comes back to the question of not only merger back 20 years ago, but now, which is, what are African Americans, both at the grassroots level, but also those who are in these influential positions, whether they have power or not, willing to do? For example, even a resolution is non-binding. Even as I hear now that these council members who are going to fight for this tape to be released, it's a non-binding resolution. The question I think that Dr. Jones is really posing really is, for African Americans who have been in these positions, who are assistant Commonwealth attorneys, right? Who are vice presidents at GLI, who are former candidates for mayor, people like, let's be honest, former Councilman David Tandy. I'm talking about Urban League President, CEO Sadiqa Reynolds. I'm talking about people like William Summers IV, who sits on the Arena Authority Board. I mean, African Americans in positions of power who are in influence. The question often is, the tree makers and the jelly makers. We know what the tree shakers are doing. They're the ones shaking for some sort of political representation and repair. But what are the Whitney Youngs of our generation doing in these seats of power? Are they actually delivering something that is achievable and is something that African Americans want? And correct me if I'm wrong, but the only, at least from my sources, the only officer who I even hear about being potentially prosecuted is Officer Brent Hackinson, because he's at the back of the apartment shooting inside. Other than that, I'm not hearing any conversation from politicos or law enforcement about any sort of prosecution or criminal charges against any of these officers.
Yep. Appreciate that, Phil. I know Cassie over here shaking your head. You may want to get back in, so I don't want to take away from it. I just want to say this, though. The culture of shoot first and ask questions later needs to go. Good brother Cedric Richmond, congressman down there in New Orleans from my hometown, talks about this a lot, about this whole culture of police. Hey, look, we had the facts. Like, for example, when Lanita said the report they got was almost 2 years, it was stale. It was 2 years old, right? So you're going to go into
2 months.
2 months old, right? When typically those reports are within 24, 48 hours, at the latest 72 hours, right? So she just told us exactly how that kind of typically plays out. So we had 2-month-old information that wasn't good to begin with, right? And you go into an apartment, you shoot first and ask questions later. And now
here's the question though, Cirillo,
yeah.
People say, oh, the system is broken, the system needs to be fixed.
No.
The system appeared to work exactly how it's supposed to.
Oh, but I say it worked exactly. I don't mean to laugh about it, but
talks about the Black moderate. Dr. Jones, you tell me if you disagree with this. I'm sure you will, if you do. But look, we talk about the war on drugs, and we look at the war against DeMarcus Glover. Yeah, there are conservative elements in this state who are law enforcement, law and order conservatives, Clintonian Democratic centrists who certainly are for this. But remember, the 1994 crime bill that created sort of this knock down every door, militarized police departments, you had members of the Congressional Black Caucus who also supported that legislation, who are also for that. And many times, Charles knows this, you go to these meetings, these neighborhood meetings, some of the first people who are calling for get that drug house knocked down by any means necessary. They're not talking about community investment. They're talking about sending in the SWAT team, sending whoever you can to knock down that drug house. And now I think people are beginning to see with this Breonna Taylor case, what that entails. It's not simply the police knocking on that bad person's door. It's not just them pulling over this drug dealer who you hate so much, you don't like those kids hanging on the corner. It means that you're gonna get pulled over. It means the head of the largest Black church in Louisville is gonna get pulled over. The homecoming king in valedictorian is gonna get pulled over. And by the way, Charles didn't mention it, he got pulled over when he first started running for US Senate. Blocks from his home, the day he started doing his tour for Eastern Kentucky, Charles, who's running for US Senate, gets pulled over by Louisville police. So that's the thing we need to think about as well, is that when you ask for these policies, when you're thinking about, let's shut down that drug house, before you say, let's get the police on it, you may want to think of what Couture said earlier, because that policy in place, as Chief Conrad, who's affable, who's nice, everyone likes him, but he said to my face when we interviewed him about Reverend Cosby's pullover, this is a high crime area, this is what we're gonna do.
People, places, narcotics. I represent the homecoming king. I represent the homecoming king in that case too. So, but the people, places, narcotics, it was bullshit. It was, let's pull people over. We're gonna go in Black neighborhoods, pull any young man driving a nice car over, and we're gonna pull them out and search their car.
So this
you
is
have an 18-year-old who had just graduated college, was worked and still works as a car salesman, a nice young man, one of the sweetest young men you will ever meet, humiliated on the side of the road in handcuffs, and officers have the nerve at the end of that stop to say, why do you have such a negative view of police?
But I think
he probably didn't before that stop.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, but I think the point is here that, and Cassie, please speak to this as well, is that a total reimagination of how we enter and engage politics. It's not about tinkering with current systems. Yeah. Oftentimes it's about radically changing how those systems even operate. Because there's a long time, I can't say his name, he's a good source, but a long time former top official in Louisville police said to me, in the West End, it's law and order. In the East End, it's protect and serve. And that's the reason why when a young white girl is drunk down at Flanagan's or O'Shea's, we get her into an Uber. And if a young black girl is drunk outside of Legends or Cole's place, we knock her upside the head.
Or if
Phil, look, all of this goes.
or Mayor Fisher's son was found passed out with drugs in his car, nobody knows that Mayor Fisher's son even had a job. He was pulled over with drugs in his car, found passed out on Bardstown Road. We don't know. We haven't heard anything about this story. It came and went, right?
Well, I'll put a bow on it very quickly, Cirillo, to your points, Phil. This all runs back to white supremacy and their opportunities to make decisions at every turn, from the Democratic Party to the police officer on the block. As you talk about civilian review, again, is something that was brought up in this city decades ago. When it finally passed, it was passed as a toothless ordinance. All the Civilian Review Board here does is they look at the police the integrity unit investigations to see if the integrity unit itself made any mistakes. And quite often that board will get cases when they're 1, 2, 3 years old. They're done. There is no subpoena power. There is no power in that at all. And you may ask, how do I know? Because I'm on that board.
And they fought you to get on that board, by the way.
And I'm about to make that point. And I had to fight to get on that board when Brent Ackerson, a Democrat, made the argument that he and another Metro Council member said they felt that we needed more African-American representation on the board, but they didn't think that I was the right African-American to be on the board, right? So these are white people basically, once again, saying you uppity Negroes need to sit down somewhere because you are not acceptable to us. So the question is, when our men are killed, when our women are killed, when our children are killed, when the Democratic Party handles us like whores that they come to see at 2 a.m. and then creep out the back door every 2, 4, or 6 years because they want our votes, but then they do absolutely nothing to speak to us as a constituency, even though since 1960 we have been the most loyal constituents. The question is, what are we gonna do, right? What are we gonna do? Are we gonna keep following milquetoast black people who keep kissing up to white people who are pimping our communities? Or are we going to get behind some folk who really gonna punch that in the face and deal with some wide scale restructuring? So as I said before, I left the word out of my column when I said die, cry, repeat. It's really die, cry, protest, repeat. So white power structures look at us, all those Negroes gonna do is go march out on the street somewhere for a few days, then they get tired, it's over, and it's back to business as usual. So again, my question is, what are we gonna do?
And look, Dr. Jones, that's a great question to kind of lead into more of the Q&A. I really want to, I know we're a little over time, but if folks got a little patience, thank y'all so much for joining on. This is Black with No Chaser. We're on the air with Lenita Baker, Philip Bailey, Dr. Jones, Casa, Couture, Brother Booker, rep running for U.S. Senate, and we also Lakeisha in the building. So y'all, thank y'all so much for being patient with us. Thank you so much for joining this program right now. If y'all stick with us for a little bit longer, we got a couple more things to drop into. I want to take a question from the actual audience right now for y'all while we have y'all here. So stay tuned. One of the questions was, and I think these are two questions, but they're kind of similar. So I want to kind of make sure I just kind of take them both at the same time. And basically, to your point, Dr. Jones, is like, as we look at what's happening to Breonna Taylor and all throughout the country, right? In Louisville and throughout the country, if we want to help, how can we begin to connect with you all on this panel? The thing that you're actually wrapped into and busy with every single day. But taking a step further than that, though, is that what are some other things that we could be tapping into as a collective that can help with this effort right here?
Right now, we need people to be voting. People need to be weighing in on the voting process. We are in the midst of a pandemic. We have the opportunity to radically change how we do business. We keep hearing from our elected officials about reopening the economy. We need to be talking about how we're going to live in a different kind of way. And the first way that we do that is by sending people to Frankfurt, sending people to Congress, sending people at 6th and Jefferson who look like us and who are going to listen to us. So first, Find out how you're gonna vote and vote. Go to KFTC, go to Vote Kentucky. There's opportunities, all that opportunities. I wanted to say two things on the policy front though. This past session during COVID, when our legislators were meeting, they weren't supposed to. They also passed a piece of legislation that gave timeline 2 other years and gave judges two more years in their seats right now. That's a bill that's passed, and so they go from 6 years to 8 years for our Commonwealth attorney. We need to vote. We need to vote to get better representatives. Another piece on the policy thing. So several years ago, there was a triple homicide. Mayor Fisher put together another task force. Tons of Black folks came together. Researchers from the University of Louisville, Dr. Blaine Hudson's work was used so that the mayor can create this office of safe and healthy neighborhoods, who hasn't done anything to change the situation. Right now, that department is probably on the chopping block. Not because it's not needed, because we have a mayor who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And he's putting people in positions who don't know what they're doing. These mealy mouth brothers and sisters who don't know what they're doing. So it's time for us to vote and vote and vote and get them out of here.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yep.
I want to, and actually, I was thinking about this when Couture was speaking as well. I think there's always a question for me, like what do the solutions entail? Like when trauma happens and we're justifiably angry, we should be, and we should not stop being angry until things change. What do the next steps look like? And Casa definitely framed it up in terms of activating our voice. And I think Couture is a living example of what you do after you activate your voice at the ballot box, is you organize and you become a lobbyist. We need citizen lobbyists. We need folks that are actually going to go into these spaces and fight back the same way that people do for all other interest groups. And in companies will sure enough hire somebody to come fight for them. And we need to be putting people in positions that understand we're trying to change the system. It was either Cass or Couture, they both dope. So one of y'all mentioned the fact that we need to reimagine how we fund public safety, and that public safety is not simply putting more money into law enforcement. We need leaders to get that. And I want to make a commitment, because Couture flagged a piece of legislation that is central. And again, we gotta beat on the wall from the outside, but we need people that are gonna get in the room and disrupt that shit and flip the table over and get stuff done in positions that can make decisions.
They listen to us when we show up, y'all.
And they sure do. They sure do.
Kicking the Republicans' ass this session. They were listening to her. Is that your sister? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, they look, when Couture walk in committee, I just wink my eye like I know we got it. You and me. But the point that she raised on, the disproportionate impact and racial impact, we need that for every bill. Every policy, every budgetary decision needs to be able to account for how it is dismissing, ignoring, or harming the Black community and communities of color in general, because we got to understand this is structural, it's at a systemic level. And I'm committed to that, and I want to make sure that y'all knew that from me here.
Hey, look, and I just want to add this really quickly, is like I work with gun violence prevention groups around the country, right? And so to me, police violence is gun violence, no matter how you want to couch it. And so instances like Breonna Taylor are instances of gun violence, right? So as we think about gun violence prevention and how it shows up in our communities, in Black communities, in brown communities, one thing you got to keep a close eye on is that when governors like Governor Hogan out in Maryland actually refuse to sign over and approve funding for gun violence prevention measures, right? Sustainable solutions, resource, evidence-based research that can go into communities and is proven to reduce gun violence across the board. When you don't put any preventative measures in place and you have the budget for it and the will of the legislature, right? He vetoed that actually bill. That's out in Maryland. And so what I'm saying is a microcosm what's happening around the country about lawmakers, stakeholders, policymakers, wherever you want to call them, right, aren't really invested in preventative measures and these type of measures that Maryland could have passed, right? You have other states that have done a little more work on the lower end. St. Louis just passed, I think they granted about $1 million or so. I'm not sure where that program is at right now, but there are cities and a very handful of states that are taking preventive measures using these evidence-based research backed by the ACLUs and curative violence on the ground in Chicago and things of that nature, and folks down in Jackson and people out here in violence interrupters in DC, right? These people are on the ground doing the work and they know best. I think it's time we actually start trusting these folks, investing in our communities, and get rid of the idea that we need to invest more in policing, just like Katua brought up. We need to divest those resources, put them back into the hands of community leaders and community members at large, and make sure we're doing what we can to actually prevent crime at the actual source, right? And I'll say crime, I just say violence, or actually disruptions, if you will, because sometimes, though, a lot of times these things are actually like a ripple effect of a lot of things that could have actually been prevented if people were in place at the source on the ground to kind of keep these things from happening. So I just want to make sure we say that.
5 or 6 grocery stores closed in our community since our mayor ran, and he ran on supporting and improving our local food system. Brothers and sisters literally are around here, can't have good disagreements because folks are hungry and don't have good food. I think about that all the time. What is it like for you to be 19 and 20 years old and you arguing with a brother for stepping on your shoes and you ain't had shit to eat but a McDonald's burger? You do have no ability to make good decisions. And so, yeah, take some money from that police department and put it and invest it in our communities now.
And I think one thing we're talking about on voting, is a lot of comments in here. I think we would be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to say you need to request your mail-in ballot, because I don't think anybody's really getting ready to go out there to the fairgrounds and wait in line because that's the only polling place. So it's www.jeffersoncountyclerk.org /A, B as in boy, S, app request. Go request your mail-in ballot now so that you have plenty of time to get it.
And I think it's a good, thank you so much. I think it's a good point to bring up the fact that House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi just passed, and the House Democrats just passed a $3 billion stimulus package, in addition to what already passed before, for things like mail-in ballot and absentee voting. So look, that right now is in the hands of the GOP-led Senate. So when you're thinking about, right, the person that's leading the Senate right now, which is Mitch McConnell, we have a brother right here, Charles Booker, that's actually ready and willing to go and sign things like that put people first. And so we just want to make sure we stand by that. We understand that what's at stake. People are at stake. Lives are at stake. We're talking about healthcare on the ballot right now. We're talking about gun violence prevention on the health ballot on the ballot right now. These are public crises that are happening all throughout the country, in neighborhoods all throughout the country, black and brown and whatnot. And so we got folks out here that are ready and willing. We got over 300 viewers right now that's watching, ready and willing to take action. So we thank y'all for tuning in. I want to make sure we go around really quickly before we end the show for everybody to have at least a few seconds, if you will, for closing remarks.
Who's first? I feel
ladies first. So I think Sister Baker is in my left-hand side of my screen. So we'll start with you. Okay.
One thing before my closing, I'm also told you can request your mail-in ballot at 502-574-6100. That's 502-574-6100. Get those ballots and don't wait too late. But very great discussion. We got to take part in the political process. We got to do informed voting on behalf of the Breonna Taylor family. I see a lot of questions about what can we do. As we said, contact your local representatives, so your Metro Council members, your state representatives, get legislation passed. Policy change is not enough. We need it codified into law. We want laws enforcing change as it pertains to no-knock warrants. They need to be eliminated for the most part, and change as it refers to body cameras and wearing body cameras during the execution of all search warrants. Call the mayor's office, Chief Conrad. His time is up. We've had one too many scandals. He just doesn't get the way to police the Black community, and he's not really taking the time to try to figure it out. And he's had way more than enough time, so he needs to go. And also on behalf of the Taylor family, call Tom Wine's office and demand that they drop Kenny Walker's charges against him. So.
Tom Wine's office phone number is 502-595-2300. Hit 0 and leave a message. You can also call LMPD at 2136 or 574-7660. You can request a ballot from the local Board of Elections office. You can also sign up to be a poll worker. Right now, they're saying they're doing in-person voting right now. The plan is for everybody to be at the expo with National Guards. I don't think that that's going to be a welcoming place for us to vote. And we're trying to push that we have more than one election site, and that we have one of the things is that, poll workers are older. We don't have enough. Right now, they got to train everybody. So if you are healthy, willing, and able, sign up at the Board of Elections office to also be a poll worker. So that no longer is an excuse for them to have to close our polls.
Yeah, and the last thing I would like to say is if you are out there and you work with young people, teenagers, and you want to teach them and activate them, please feel free to reach out to me. I am willing to start teaching our young folks how to be involved. You can reach me at Twitter at katura.heron or follow me on Facebook or get a hold of me somehow. But we need to definitely start teaching our young people and preparing our young people to start being in these spaces and places. Thank you.
Mr. Pulitzer Prize winning Bailey.
Yeah.
I'll just say a few things. One, keep paying attention to this case. Things are rapidly moving with, even in our conversation here, multiple sources are contacting me about how, look, the conversation is shifting in City Hall away from Chief Conrad onto Mayor Fisher. And there are conversations even right now, I'm allowed to say from multiple sources, about impeaching Mayor Fisher over the Breonna Taylor shooting. Number two, I think we also need to remember that, look, we are all potentially, this is a Second Amendment and Fourth Amendment issue, just in the way that it is with the Patriot Act or the FISA court. Breonna Taylor is barely mentioned in this search warrant, yet she got wrapped up in this case and police came to her home and she is dead now. So there is a question of decision-making, both from the local police department and the narcotics division, both the decision-making of Judge Mary Shaw and the judges, who are they reviewing and protecting constitutional rights, much in the same conversation politically we have about COVID-19 restrictions and Senator Rand Paul can have about the FISA Court and Patriot Act. We need to have that same conversation here in Louisville. And thirdly, I think this is important. We don't need to exaggerate the facts. The facts are troubling enough already. We don't need to have wild conspiracy theories about Black people because we've lived through those conspiracies. They're not conspiracies in our history, they're called history. So we don't need to make up or have exaggerations about, oh, they went to the wrong address. No, they went to the address they were supposed to go to. The question is, why? Why was Breonna Taylor, who had apparently a cursory interaction with the individual they were looking at, why was her home targeted for a no-knock warrant at 1 a.m. when, if you talk to narcotics detectives, veteran narcotics detectives who are Black, that's not how we handle things. So those are the three things I would tell people to pay attention to. This case is going to move very rapidly within the next few days. I think by Friday, we're going to have a whole different conversation about this shooting.
Can I go now so we can save the last word for Brother Booker? I think he deserves the last word. First of all, let me say this. For any teacher, the thing that makes us most proud is to see our students do incredible things as their lives move forward. So to all of y'all here tonight, from Ms. Tobin to Ms. Baker to the Heron sisters to Philip, I love y'all and I'm incredibly proud of you because you're doing some things that I never could have done in spaces that I've never gone to. And so please keep that up. And I'm here if you need me. I believe in the Second Amendment too, if it goes to that point. Two, I think it's really important that we pay attention to the overall ideology that we talk about, whether it's Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor here in Louisville. We have to ask the question, why do local officials in these areas not even pay attention to these deaths until something is done to shine not just a national, but an international spotlight on? That's troubling. So what that really speaks to, I think, is a reaffirmation that there is very little valuing of Black life And unless there are people like you all and others who are going to shine lights on it, then it gets ignored. And let's not fool ourselves. There are a whole lot more of these cases going on around the country every day that we never, ever hear about. The third thing is, remember this idea of white supremacy, because people will say, whenever you talk about white supremacy, folks will call you a racist. You can have white people in your life that you love. I have white friends and still be against white supremacy. And if there are white people in your life, in your circles, at your company, at your school, at your place of business that you interact with socially, who pushes back against you fiercely whenever you talk about living a life that is dedicated to pushing against white supremacy, they're probably not your friend. So that's important to remember. And lastly, there's been a lot of talking here tonight about voting. And I can't remember who said it. Might have been Ms. Baker, might have been Ms. Herron, might have been both. Talked about informed voting. We have to develop a way, I think, to have conversations around politics and policy and parties that is before they precede the delivering of candidates to primaries and to general elections. Because what we're quite often getting right now is a choice between the witch and the devil, with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as they're currently constituted. What we really need, ideally, is the development of at least a third party and probably more. A conversation that Philip and I had some weeks ago, you mentioned Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who said there's really no ideological reason other than the failure of the two-party system why she and a Joe Biden should be in the same party. They really shouldn't be. So the Democrats have largely failed the Black community. And I'll close with I publicly endorse Brother Booker. I will again. I don't do that with politicians because I think most of them are liars who don't believe in anything other than getting elected and then continuously reelected. He believes in something. I'm contributing to his campaign. I'm asking you to contribute to his campaign. We live in a capitalist society. Money shouldn't be everything, but in America, it almost is. Don't be confused. He has to get through the Democratic primary in June before he can get to the general in November. The Democrats are pushing a candidate in the person of Amy McGrath. Maybe
That's
Charles
right.
can't say this, but I will.
That's
the
right.
Democrats pushing a candidate in the person of Amy McGrath, who is the type of person who basically literally licks her finger in the morning, goes out, sees which way the wind is blowing, and that's where she's gonna move with her philosophy for that day. This is a woman who has changed her mind on things literally within hours after receiving public criticism. What does that tell you? She believes in nothing, and I have not heard her mention Black people at all. So if you believe in justice, if you believe in equality, if you believe we can get to the point where that we're all in this together is not, and we can actually realize some type of humanity in a country that said all men are created equal, when the founding fathers themselves who wrote it were holding slaves themselves. If you believe in American ideals, at least give a little bit of money to a man to give him a fighting chance to help bring that past. So thank you, Ms. Tobin. Thank you, Brother Cirillo, for inviting me to hang out with you tonight. I'm gonna get off here, contemplating my existence, and drink a little scotch. Thanks to everybody. Go have a drink, kiss your babies because they need it.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, brother. Hey, Charles Brooker, take us away, man.
So my brother, Dr. Jones, really brought it home. I think I'll just say that it has been my privilege to do a lot of listening here. And what we need in terms of our elected officials, folks that call themselves public servants, is to show up and to shut up and then know when to speak on our behalf and get the work done that we're demanding. What we're talking about right now is immediate concerns that should then spark our push for long-term concerns. And the bigger conversation we're trying to have is, how do we push for system level change? And how do we actually change the institutions and the structures that perpetuate the harm that has devastated Breonna and her family, my family, so many of y'all's families? How do we actually change that? And I'm dedicating myself to be accountable to that work. And I know everybody on this panel would kick my ass if I don't do it. And I just want to make this point clear. We have a lot of collective power that we leave on the table. And I know history, at least over the past couple of generations, since we've really had a movement and since the likes of Malcolm X, we've felt like and been conditioned in a lot of ways to believe that our voices don't matter and that the places where decisions are made are not for us. That has to change. Part of it is us showing up and taking that seat back, but also It's doing the work that folks like Couture and Casser are doing. And honestly, folks like Philip Bailey are doing that are shining the light on the challenges and continuing to show up and organize for an agenda that is ultimately about ending generational poverty and structural racism. And I just believe that with all this power in the room, and Lanita, I'm on a lot of people's shoulders that's on this panel, and that's really dope and inspiring for me. My hope is that we see our collective power and we use it, not only to demand accountability from this administration, but to demand change regardless of what administration comes next. That's what the work needs to be about.
Amen.
Again, I want to thank each one of you guys for your time and sharing information, because this is information that we all need to know. One, not only from a local level in Louisville, but on a national level, because again, these are issues that we deal with state to state. No-knock warrants are allowed in practically every state but Oregon. I think Florida prohibited, and also Houston last year decided to go against no-knock warrants. And on the flip side, you have your stand your ground. And to me, it's important that everybody knows the facts, know who to vote for, because that is very important to vote. Again, it is important for us to have people that look like us that are in the rooms that are making these decisions about us. So again, I would like to thank everybody on this panel, Anita, Dr. Jones, Representative Booker, Pulitzer Prize winner, Philip Bailey. I have to give you that. I'm sorry, I'm gonna do it every time.
Hey, I don't mind that. Now keep doing that. Yeah.
That's a big deal. Everybody, again, Juanita, Casa, Katura, again. So when I originally thought of putting all of you guys together, it came from a phone call that I had with a friend of mine that currently resides in Louisville. And this was a little bit before I contacted Mr. Bailey about this, Pulitzer Prize winning Bailey about this. But she and I were talking, and we were talking about COVID, and she was saying that, you know, she would love to focus on COVID and staying safe, but she has a 16-year-old son that she is concerned about on a daily basis. And she said, you know, unfortunately, I have to put my energy into making sure my son comes home safe at night. And again, I have a son, I have a brother, I have uncles. So this is, again, a very important topic to me. So anyone that knows me knows that either I'm talking about health or I'm talking about us. So again, everybody that is watching, contact any of these individuals. If you want to be involved, I say get involved. This is pretty much my first effort in getting involved, because again, we know that the system is flawed. So now, what are we going to do? What do we do? What are the steps? But again, it is, to me, important that we have individuals that are in places that are, when they're making laws about us, we need to be there. And that is important. So again, thank you everyone for your contribution to this. And please continue the conversation beyond this. I would love to see all of you guys get together and actually, you know, put something together and, you know, for the city. And again, thank you. I also would like to thank the platform, Black with No Chaser, for coming on and helping me produce this. You know, I'm more of a producer, not a moderator. So thank you for your help, Sorello, with just the flow of this conversation. And that's it. So thank you guys.
Appreciate that. I just want to jump in really quickly, y'all. Probably going to take maybe less than 60 seconds. Again, my name is Sorello Monig. I'm the partner here over at Black with No Chaser. We thank you so much for tuning into this actually very esteemed panel. We got folks from all across Louisville working on this issue right now, from family attorney Lanita Baker to Pulitzer Prize winner Philip Bailey to Dr. Ricky Jones, the University of Louisville, senatorial candidate, U.S. senatorial candidate Charles Booker. We got Cassie, we got Couture sisters in there in the fight, man. We got Takesha Toba in the building. So thank you so much for y'all tuning in. I'll be remiss if I don't do a shameless plug right now. Very, very important. Every single day, the Black Lunch Break gets on at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central Time. We actually bring on folks just like this for a very engaging conversation. So look, I just want to say that for everybody on this panel, you're always invited to come on, man, and as an individual and be one of our featured guests. I thank you from the bottom of my heart to actually being a part of this. It was an honor for me to be a part of this moment. And trust me, I won't forget it. Charles, I'll be making a donation to your campaign, brother, and I'll be following everybody around this country. Anybody that wants this platform to continuously talk about what's happening around Breonna Taylor, stand your ground laws and citizens arrest laws, racist ass DAs, you name it, we can come on here and talk about it and activate our people in a real way. So I just want to let that be known. You heard it here first on the on Black with No Chaser, man. So thank y'all so much, and good night to everybody out there. And tune in tomorrow, the Black Lunch Break. Holla.
All right, vote Booker.
Good night, fam.
Yo.
Good night.
And it's back on after the primary.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's
All
right.
right, y'all. Later.
Thank you.